Okay. So we wanted to bring like concept of developers, like instead of us developing an application and then calling our API, we wanted to encourage developers to build application and then do authentication through us and then call the API. So developer, like all the users' credential will be with the Driven computing platform, like whatever car he has, like he can register with Driven platform, and then a developer will authenticate himself with like a secret ID, and then he will authenticate the user through us, and he will get a token, and then he can use that particular token to call different APIs that Driven has. So I first little bit of research on how OAuth works. So right now I'll be covering there are different kinds of grant in OAuth mechanism, whether you want a grant based on authorization code or like an implicit grant which is meant for use in browser. Or for three-legged authentication I'll be covering the authorization code grant. So suppose there is a user who wants to who wants to allow a client to access a protected API on the OAuth server. So my job was to build a OAuth server using Node.js library, so that we can allow a client. Suppose this is a developer server. Developer needs access to protected API. This API gives user information or connect, so that this client can act on behalf of user. So we want to pass this, without giving the username password, we want to pass this authority. User want to pass this authority so that developers can call APIs on their behalf. So it starts with the first login. User goes to the developer's page, I want to log in. So the developer will send back, do you give them option, do you want to log in through Facebook or Twitter? Similarly, he will get an option, do you want to log in using Driven platform? Once he said yes, a library would be invoked and he will be redirected to the server. There is never a direct communication between a client and a server. They talk to each other indirectly by redirecting the user back and forth. If server wants to communicate to the client or server, he will redirect it to the client. Similarly, if client wants to talk to the server, then he will redirect him to the OAuth server. So now client wants to talk to the OAuth server that I want to authenticate this user, and he will specify what kind of scope he wants, whether he wants scope email or call all the APIs or some fixed API. So he will define, I want to authenticate this user for a particular scope, and what kind of mechanism I'm comfortable with, whether implicit grant is required or what is the response type. So he will redirect him to the server. So when he's redirected, the user will communicate with the OAuth server, and all the details will be filled in. So when the client is redirecting the user, he will put all the values, what is the response type. Response type define what is the type of grant that the client wants, whether it's implicit, whether it's password based, or whether it's code based or token based. So here the client has specified that he is interested in a code based grant type. Then he will specify, okay, he will identify himself, okay, I am this client. Developer will give his ID, I am this developer. And he will give a callback URL, redirect URL. So suppose OAuth server wants to communicate, he will use this redirect URLs. At the end, at the last, he will define the scope. What is the scope of this authorization? What kind of authorization he wants? So right now, so when a user is redirected to the OAuth server, it will have all these values. Then now, when the server receives this request, it will check whether a user is authenticated with him or not. If a user is not authenticated, he will ask the user to authenticate himself. Then he will ask the user whether you want to grant this permission to a particular client or not.
Oh,
So,
So it wasn't Ian?
So once the OAuth server has authenticated the user, he will redirect him to the client. Now what server wants to do is like to talk to the client and pass him the authorization code. So that's why he's like redirecting the user back to the client, and in the URL he will specify the authorization code. So the OAuth whole process is like divided into two parts, like first getting the authorization code, and then second using that authorization code to get a particular authorization token. So when he's redirected back, user will like again connect back to the client, which is like in the next slide. So here is the authorization code which was there in the previous step. When user was redirected, he will like connect back to the authorization client, and when he tries to connect it, the URL will have the authorization code in it. So now both of them has like communicated using the user, and now the authorization code has like reached the developer, the client, authorization client. Now only thing which is left is like he can use this authorization code to like get the authorization token. How he does it, like he will have a unique identifier, like a secret client ID. He will send his client ID, his client password, and he will send like the authorization code which he has received. So he sends back all these things back to the authorization server. Server validates them, and if it's found that like all things are valid, then he will like give back a token back to the client. Once the client receives the token, he can call all the protected API inside the authorization server. So the four main steps are like first, the client through user communicates to the server like what kind of grant he is interested in. Once the server validates all the parameters and like knows what the client wants, he redirects back the user after authentication, so that user can pass back the authorization code to the client. Once the client has the authorization code, it makes a request to the server saying like, I have this code, this is my client ID, this is my client secret, please give back me the token. So after he receives this token, he can make the protected API call. So I was studying about like different kind of grants in OAuth. The problem with like mobile application is like they cannot keep anything secret. Like the client ID is supposed to be only stored at the client side. Like the developer cannot reveal its ID to other developers. With mobile, it's like I have installed some app, and if that app has the client secret, anybody can like reverse engineer the application and have the client secret. So in browser or in like mobile application, instead of like using three-legged authentication, we use like two-legged authentication, wherein like instead of like having the authorization code and then using authorization code to get back the token, we directly the server directly pass back the token to the mobile application. So the problem is like we cannot do both things. First, like identify a unique client, and then identify a user. You can only like authenticate the user and pass back the token. It's not possible to authenticate a client, because the client secrets, because like the client secret here will not be confidential in the mobile application. I'll quickly.